Welcome to One-on-One with Expert Flyer. I'm your host, Lisa Caslin, and today we have Kathleen Peddicord with us. She's an author and the editor and publisher of liveandinvestoverseas.com. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hello, good morning. Great to be here.
Good to have you. So there's been a flurry of activity on the internet since this election took place, and apparently Canada's immigration site crashed shortly after the results. That was pretty interesting.
Very crazy, exactly. It was a running joke throughout the election and the campaigning, if fill in the blank candidate wins, I'm moving to Canada, which I always thought was a little crazy because, okay, fine, fair enough, you see that reason to leave, but Canada is not the best choice in a lot of ways. Nothing against Canada, it's great in many ways, but it's very cold most of the year.
It is. So thankfully, you have come to the rescue, and you've called out, about a half a dozen sunny spots that people, if they choose to either move there permanently, whatever their political persuasion is, or just want to decompress now when the weather gets cold. So talk about some of your top choices.
Well, really, I would say the best place in the world right now to think about relocating if you're looking to live somewhere sunny, warm, friendly, fun, beautiful, safe, welcoming, all of that, and affordable. My number one pick right now is the Algarve, Portugal, which may take people by surprise. Typically, we're talking about places in Central and South America and Latin America, and we'll talk about those in a minute. There are lots of great choices in that part of the world, and it's nearby, accessible, and lots of sunshine and all of that. But the Algarve is the sunniest spot in Europe, one of the longest coastlines in Europe, and right now it's super, super affordable. The Algarve and Portugal in general are one of the most affordable regions of Europe, of continental Europe. It's very undervalued in general, and right now the dollar is so strong against the euro that someone with dollars, an American, can very realistically think about living or retiring to a number of places in Europe, and I would put the Algarve at the top of that list. And one primary reason is it's so sunny, it's so pretty, it's so quintessentially old world. It has all of the medieval villages and old world squares and all of that, the cafe culture that we think about with Europe, and that's wonderful. And again, right now, we Americans can really afford it more than we have been able to in decades.
Love to hear that. Yeah, I was surprised that you actually did have a little European entry there. So that was very, very nice to hear. What else do you have?
All right, then if we come back to the part of the world that I think people think of first, let's go to one obvious choice. Maybe not move to Canada for some adventure or a new life or to reinvent yourself, because Canada's cold, as we said, but it is nearby, it is accessible, it is comfortable and familiar to Americans, but just look south. So is Mexico. Mexico is so accessible, so nearby, and again, so comfortable to Americans. We know it so well. We're just connected, And it is, unlike Canada, it is super sunny, super warm, and it has a great diversity of lifestyle offers that I think are so appealing. It has a long Caribbean coast, it has a long Pacific coast, and then it's got also great mountain villages for highlands living, where the temperatures are cooler and much more comfortable, and some great old colonial cities. San Miguel de Allende, for example, up in the mountains, where the climate is cool, but still sunny, but not tropical. Not everyone, I think sunshine is important, but not everyone is up for the heat and humidity of the tropics down at sea level. So there are some interesting mountain options in Mexico as well.
Okay, agreed, but there is an elephant in the room. So once Trump takes office, don't you think that there may be a little bit of a strained relationship with Mexico?
I think there could be, but it's a good point to bring up. We try to ignore politics, not to pretend they don't exist. We are aware, obviously, of what's going on in the world, and you have to pay attention. But we are apolitical because these ideas are apolitical. What we're talking about it doesn't have anything to do with politics. It has to do with lifestyle. And I've been living outside the States full-time for 18 years. I moved 18 years ago to Waterford, Ireland, then to Paris, France. Now I live in Panama City. I've traveled to 60 or 65 countries. I've seen a lot of the world, and I've known people living in many places. And what I've found, and what I've seen from others as well, is at street level, people are people, and people can be welcoming and get along and have a great experience that is completely separate from whatever is going on politically and at the higher levels, as it were. So yes, Trump may strain relations between the United States and Mexico, but does that have anything to do with an American retiree in Mexico? I really don't think it will. The one thing that a retiree needs to pay attention to that can be called political, excuse me, is personal property rights. You don't want to go somewhere where someone is not respecting personal property rights. Right now, I would put Venezuela in that category. Venezuela is not, Venezuela is in chaos. It's too much of a disaster so that what's going on politically and economically is actually a reality of life down at street level. In most of the world, though, most of the time, that's not the case. The politics goes on separate from life, you know, down in the communities.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is Mexico will always depend on U.S. tourism, no matter what happens, right? Okay, great. Keep going.
Okay, then in the Caribbean, I would recommend right now one place that I love that I think has so much to offer in this context is Las Terrenas in the Dominican Republic. So Las Terrenas is a little beach town on the coast of the Dominican Republic, which is a great Caribbean island, shares the island with Haiti, but don't let that bother you. Again, Haiti's the other end of the island, and right, that's not a place anyone would want to choose to live right now, but the Dominican Republic is completely separate. It is safe. It is very welcoming. They are working very hard to attract foreign investors and especially American retirees. American retirees and expats in general are kind of a commodity on the world market right now. Many countries are competing for your business, dear American retiree, because you have something that they want, which is disposable US dollars. Costa Rica was the first country to figure this out back in the early 80s, then Panama, and since then many countries have gotten on board. And one way this manifests itself is through what's called a retiree visa program, making it very easy for American retirees specifically to be able to live there legally, full-time, permanently if you want, and to come and go as you like. And the Dominican Republic has launched one of these retiree visa residency programs that's very appealing. It's very affordable. Probably right now 8 or 9 countries have these. Some are more expensive than others. Some are easier to qualify for than others. The Dominican Republic's program is very easy, very straightforward. And Las Terrenas specifically is, I think, such a charming place because it's the Caribbean and it's white sand beaches and it's the water and the palm trees and it's the whole Caribbean scene that you think of. But it also has French undertones, which sounds unexpected. It's very French. It's been settled by French expats for the past 40 years or so. So there's a very strong French community. And that means that life is kind of French. There are lots of bakeries. Fresh baguette is sold everywhere. There are lots of pastry shops, French restaurants. People kiss each other on both cheeks, you know, in greeting. You hear French spoken. There are French street signs. So it has this French, very interesting French culture right there on a beautiful white sand Caribbean beach.
Wow, gorgeous. All right, I know that you just mentioned you live in Panama City, correct? And that is on your list. So why did you choose Panama City?
Frankly, for us, it was a business choice. We are not retirees. My husband and I are not at that stage of life yet. We moved here to Panama about 8 years ago to start a business. I was living in Paris at the time when I decided I wanted to start a new business of my own, living in overseas. My husband and I had been doing business in Paris for 4 or 5 years up until that point. And as soon as I said, I remember this afternoon, I walked into my husband in our lived in an apartment in Paris, which are all small. Everything in Paris is miniature. In our tiny little apartment office, I walked in and said, I'd like to start my own business, my own online publishing business. And he said, without even turning around, he said, okay, we have to leave Paris. And I said, I understand. Because we knew that no, the entrepreneur in France just doesn't stand a chance. No. So I walked out of the office and came back to leave 5 or 10 minutes later and said, so where do we go? He said, Panama. I said, yeah, because we had been doing business in Panama at that point for about 10 years, not living here full time, but we had many connections and we had been doing business. And we knew that whereas France makes it expensive, difficult, and full of hassle to be an entrepreneur, Panama is the opposite. Panama rolls out the red carpet, the welcome mat for entrepreneurs, then and still now.
Great.
Panama City is a fully fledged real city with the infrastructure you need to run a business. Living here, running a business here, it's possible to operate tax-free, legally, being fully compliant. Even as an American, you're not hedging anything, fudging anything. but you can operate here tax-free. That's a very big deal. And that for us was kind of the trump card. No pun intended. Actually, I didn't mean to say that. I really didn't. But that was one thing that really attracted us. Plus, we knew that Panama City then, but more so now, and this has become true wherever you've been here, is a melting pot, attracting qualified English-speaking labor, young labor from around the world. So our staff in Panama City, we have 35 people in the office here. A handful of them are Panamanians, a handful are Americans, but the rest are from Europe and a few other places. So we've got British and Irish and German and French and Dutch, Belgian staff, because Panama has made it very easy over the past several years for foreigners to come, get legal residency, and a work permit. Something that most countries protect their labor forces in restrictive, I think usually overly restrictive ways. Panama has welcomed outside labor because it's a small country. It's a small country that is seeing huge foreign investment of entrepreneurs, big and small. We're small. But people like Dell and other big deal people, Caterpillar, are opening offices here. They need staff. They need really real world educated, trained, and English speaking staff. Panama's a country of 3.5 million people. It couldn't possibly provide the labor that these companies need, thousands of labor force. So the previous president, Martinelli, passed this executive order, I think 5 or 6 years ago at this point, and made it very easy for foreigners to come and get work permits. And that's
fantastic.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
You never hear that. I mean,
exactly.
Thank you for that secret. Okay. So the last one I think that was on your list was Belize, which is, a beloved vacation destination.
Belize is a great country. Belize is one of the first countries I traveled to outside the States. So going back 30 years ago, it was one of my first trips. And I've been kind of infatuated with Belize ever since. Belize is 2 countries. It's a tiny country. I'd said Panama's small with a population of 3.5 million. Belize has a population of 350,000. So this is a really seriously small country. But it's 2 very different lifestyle options. One is on the coast and the islands, which is what most people think of. That's where Survivor was filmed, and Madonna wrote the song La Isla Bonita about one of the Belize islands, Ambergris Key. So that's one face of Belize. But the other face of Belize that I think it has so much to recommend it that most people aren't aware of is inland, in the mountains, inland of Belize, called the Cayo region. This is an area of rainforest and rivers and Mayan ruins, and completely different from life on the coast and on the islands. To me, Cayo is the heart and soul of Belize. And right now in our world, it offers an opportunity to leave the rest of the world behind. And a lot of people see this as an appealing idea right now. We've talked about Panama City, which is a boom town, trying to make a name for itself on the world stage. That's one lifestyle option. That's not for everyone. A completely different lifestyle option is what you find in Cayo, where it's unplugged is the best word for it, off-grid. It's a place where a lot of people do live self-sufficient lifestyles with solar power, and they catch their own water, and they grow their own food, and they live very back to basic, simple, very sweet lifestyles. It's a beautiful part of the world, frankly, a beautiful area. The weather's a bit nicer than down at coast, down on the coast at sea level, because there's a bit of elevation. And I have been attracted to this region for all the reasons I've just mentioned, but one important one as well. It has attracted over decades very independent-minded folks. So Cayo, Belize is populated by people from all around the world who have come there just to live very independently and to their own way. It's a land of pioneers, and I kind of like that idea.
I love that. All right. So before I let you go, if you were going to call out a few countries that really make sense in terms of, the pocketbook. So if I'm a retiree and I have $2,000 for living expenses per month, are there options out there?
There definitely are. Really, most of the places that we've just spoken about, in Las Terrenas, in the Algarve, in fact, in Cayo, you could live in those places on $2,000 a month. In Medellin, Colombia, you could live on $2,000 a month. And another place I'll put on the list in the context of budget living is Nicaragua. Granada, Nicaragua specifically, the old town, the old world colonial town of Granada, which is a jewel of a city. It vies for the the title of oldest city in the New World. Other cities claim that too, but Granada is in the running. And it has the quintessential classic colonial central square with the big plaza, and then the streets radiating off of it with lots of churches and old style haciendas. It has been attracting, Granada has been attracting farmers, especially American retirees, for the past 15 years or so. And so there's a very welcoming, established community there. And it's a very nice lifestyle that's available there. And you could live in Nicaragua right now in Granada for $1,200–1,300 a month.
Wow. Now, is that renting? Are you renting a home?
Renting, because you could rent a home, a small home in Granada for, say, $400 a month.
Wow, that's incredible. Really, really good information. Okay, so what if you are not a retiree, you're still working, but you want to live someplace else and maybe work remotely? A lot of people are doing that today. Are there any countries that are better? Well, Panama City, obviously, you just talked about that, where, English, the language isn't necessarily a problem, and they really are welcoming to expats working from there.
I would say I definitely put Panama at the top of that list. But in today's world, unless you want to go into business in a bigger way and have staff, then that's a different conversation. And that's really what brought my husband and me to Panama City, because we knew we needed staff to do what we wanted to do. And that limits your choices. To be able to find legal labor, because remember, it's not easy in much of the world for a foreigner to get a work permit and therefore to be able to work legally. And if not able to import legal labor from other countries, the chances of finding fully English, bona fide English speaking labor is a challenge in a non-English speaking country, obviously. So your options are limited. But if you're not looking to hire staff, you can be anywhere where you can get a good internet connection.
Exactly.
And that's most of the world today.
Okay. So you're not limited.
Yeah, I think that really, if you want to have a laptop business, be a laptop entrepreneur, be a freelance writer, be a freelance photographer, be a freelance consultant, so many businesses you can run just on your own from your laptop. And in that context, I think that you don't have to limit yourself at all. It's just a question of where would you like to be. And one interesting option, I think, in that context is to be able to move around and sample different places.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so which brings me to I guess it'll be my last question, but I could have you here all day. If one was deciding to, begin the research process here, they're committed to doing this, to moving somewhere. They obviously can't visit maybe 15 places.
Right.
Pretty cost prohibitive. So how do they begin to kind of rein those choices in? What do you recommend in terms of doing good research to figure out the best place for you?
Exactly. Start by reading. Reading. If you Google retire overseas, live overseas, retire to the Caribbean, retire to Europe, etc., you'll find hundreds of thousands of connections of resources. In today's world, this is such an easier idea than it's ever been, thanks to the internet, and thanks to the fact that by this time, millions of other people, millions of other Americans have done this. And they're all out there on the internet sharing their experiences. Some like me who are doing it in a formal way, making a business of it. I'm not the only one. But we publish a daily e-letter. It's free. It comes from me. I talk about all these different ideas every day, a different part of the world, a different topic that you need to have in your mind, on your radar as you consider this, whether it's to do with healthcare, tax, residency visas, on those categorical ideas, and then we try to pair them with geography. So if healthcare is a priority, where in the world should you focus? If weather is a priority, where should you focus? If budget's a priority, where should you focus? On and on. So we do this in a formal way. Loads of other people do too. So you can start by reading, but at some point you are going to have to get on a plane. So you can't. It's not realistic, and it would be a waste of time and money to think about traveling to 15 or 20 options. So what I recommend is do some broad general reading to start. And then when you feel comfortable, sit down and make a list of priorities. What's important to you? What's most important to you? Think in terms very practically of your lifestyle. What do you want your life to look like? If your ideal life, what would it look like? What would the view be from out your bedroom window every morning? What would you see from your back terrace or patio? Do you want to be on the water? Do you want to be in the mountains? What's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday afternoon or a Friday night? What are your favorite hobbies? What missing from your life would make you crazy? I have certain crazy ones, little specific things that are kind of embarrassing, but I use as an example. One is I want a Maytag washing machine and dryer. I lived in Ireland with locally Irish-made washing machines and dryers. I lived in Paris with tiny little French-made apartment washers and dryers, and I've been doing this with kids. And all I ever did was laundry, because you could, a pair of jeans and a pair of socks was a load of laundry in those tiny machines. So I finally said to my husband, all right, for me, a deal breaker is we have to be able to get a legitimate Maytag washing machine and dryer. That sounds silly, but it gives you an idea of how to think about this at a very practical level. Day to day, what's going to make you crazy? Because this is not easy doing this. There are huge upsides. I recommend everybody think about it, but it's not for everybody, because it's not easy. It's not without challenge. It's not without hassle. So after you go through the work of reinventing your life to somewhere new, exciting, sunny, wherever, you don't want to be unhappy because of some silly little pain in the neck day-to-day things that you didn't think about, or that you weren't honest with yourself about. You know yourself. I would never be happy if X. Well, then don't move to a place with X. Right. Make your list of priorities and don't compromise on it. Stick to that list as you do your reading, as you consider your options. Then make a short list of 2 or 3 or 4 places at most that match your priority list without compromising on the most important things. And then you do have to get on a plane. Then go see those places. And my final piece of advice is, when you go see those places, put the list and all the reading and all the note-taking aside, and just be in the place and have an instinctive reaction to it. And you'll often know within 24 or 48 hours, definitely within a few days, oh, this place is interesting, or oh my gosh, I could never live here. Why does anyone think this is nice? Kathleen Peddicord talking about how great this was. I don't know this is ridiculous. Who would live here? And that's fair enough. No place is perfect. No place is for everybody. So when you go to a place, pay attention to your instinctive reaction to it. Okay. Good or bad.
And do you think that you should make an appointment with a realtor?
Don't start with a realtor. They will find you, believe me. In these markets, show up as an American and go into a restaurant, a bar, get into a taxi. Everybody either is a real estate agent with property to sell or has a cousin who is a real estate agent with property to sell. So you don't have to go looking for here. What you need to look for, and what I do recommend you try to make appointments with right away, is an attorney. Because it's your attorney who's going to be your ally in the conversations with the real estate agents and the developers and everybody else you're going to meet and maybe do business with, negotiate with, etc. But the person you want on your team and who you should start with is an attorney. And you want an attorney who speaks real English, who's truly bilingual, who doesn't just kind of speak English, because you don't want lost in translation confusion. So someone who really speaks English, and ideally someone who has worked with other Americans doing what you're thinking about doing. So in these countries that we've talked about, more and more there are attorneys who are making practices focused on helping foreign retirees and expats, especially Americans, move, live, establish residency, and invest in their country. So it's very possible today to find choices, options for attorneys who've made a business of helping people like you do what you're thinking about doing. And then I recommend you interview them. Meet with 2 or 3 attorneys and interview them, because you're going to a new country, a new culture, where business is done differently, where there are cultural differences and nuances that you are unprepared for, that are unexpected, and in most cases the language is going to be different. So if you're looking at a contract, even a rental contract, it's going to be in another language. You need someone you feel comfortable with and trust helping you to review it.
Okay, great advice, Kathleen Peddicord. A pleasure to have you, and everybody should check out her website, liveandinvestoverseas.com, and that's going to be a great way for people to get started, right?
It is. And fair enough, don't just read my stuff, but our Live and Invest Overseas, but it's a great starting point, and then read whatever else works for you as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Thank you. Great to talk to you.
Bye-bye.